have Guy Tesler, Senior Advisor to Curiosity Lab at Peachtree Corners, Ari Roisman, co-founder of Formative, and moderator Chad Peterson, head story catcher at Head Story Catcher.
There it goes. What's going on, guys? I know we're getting late in the day. We're a little behind. We're going to see if we can catch up a little bit. But we're going to have some fun with this. I got to do one of these online, moderating kind of a similar topic here recently. And I learned a lot. It was very interesting to me to find out about all the innovation that actually is coming out of Israel. And these guys are right there in the forefront. They're going to share some awesome stuff with us. We'll do a quick introduction, but then we're going to get right into it. Because if you're like me, what I want to find out, I want to find out why Israel has so much innovation and what maybe we can take away that we can implement into our businesses and our practices. So innovation becomes a bigger thing for us. So first, if you guys go ahead, just do a quick intro and we'll jump in.
My name's Ari. I moved to Israel most recently, about right after graduate school in 2008. And then a few years after that, I founded a company and raised a lot of venture capital and innovated 2 products. We pioneered push-to-talk video, and then we made the camera for the Apple Watch. So I went through the whole experience of building a big team in Israel and lived there and led that team before I moved to Silicon Valley.
I'm Guy. I was born and grew up in Israel. Moved to Los Angeles at some point, went back to Israel, and then since 2004 lived in Atlanta, Georgia. 2007 I became part of what was then called the American Israel Chamber of Commerce for the Southeast region. In 2015 I was chosen to lead that organization that has since changed its name to Connects America-Israel Business. They changed it again, the Business Connector. And since then, since 2019, when I left that organization, I've been working with economic development, not just in Israel, but including Israel, working with organizations, helping them promote their companies in the US, in particular the Southeast US, working with individual companies, and working with local governments that are looking to increase their relationship outside the country, and we'll get a bit more about that later.
Awesome. Let's jump into this real quick because we all live here in America, right? Most of us, and it's America, the land of dreams, opportunity, innovation. But the truth is, Israel's kind of kicking our tails. What are some things that maybe some of us don't even realize that are innovations that came out of Israel that we maybe even use every day?
I think I would almost flip the question on its tail. I can't think of many things that Israel did not have a formidable role in pioneering or inventing. Certainly with like anything computing related, hardware, cybersecurity, the specific things don't come to mind. I'm sure Guy knows.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things, and I'm sure I can sit here all night and give examples, but a lot of you marketers and web people probably use Wix. Wix is a company that started in Israel. A lot of companies in the cybersecurity area, Checkpoint, a few others on that side. There's companies in like Amdocs that started in the phone book and is now different areas of consulting. So if you look inside, you'll find a lot of the either the companies themselves came out of Israel or they have some Israel in them.
I mean, most large technology companies have their primary or most productive R&D center in Israel, including Intel, Apple, Samsung, Microsoft, etc.
Google,
Google has a huge,
IBM,
yeah.
and many, many more. I think probably the largest private company in Israel today is Intel, and a lot of the chips that historically and currently are inside the Intel machines are developed and manufactured in Israel. Again, this is an area that we can talk about forever.
Okay, so let's look at that. You flipped the question. You're like, I can't think of anything that probably doesn't have any kind of tie innovatively. Innovatively? I don't know if that's a word, but we'll pretend it is now. Without having ties to Israel. So what is it that goes on in Israel? What's different about Israel that innovation is such a big part of what happens there?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to call out, which is probably not what you typically hear, right? Maybe people here might have read Startup Nation. I think Saul Singer has a sequel now to that book. A lot of folks point to the army and that collective experience, or certain like character traits that are common amongst Israelis. But I just think it'd be silly to not just point to the fact that Israel is a Jewish country and most of the residents are Jewish. So I think looking like a layer deeper at some of the things that have been like a rich part of Jewish tradition for thousands of years, or just parts of like what is common and in the community is kind of like a shallow way of looking at things. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is there's a tremendous emphasis within the world of Judaism and the Jewish community on study, and particularly on innovation. In the yeshiva, which is like a dojo for rabbis, if you will, the emphasis is on something called a chiddush, which is essentially an insight or an innovative way of looking at something. And what rabbis in training in these rabbi dojos called yeshivas do all day is they sit and study case studies and layer upon layer of philosophical arguments that are literally thousands of years old and written in cryptic Aramaic and Hebrew. And they break open these case studies, probing different ways of looking at a problem. And like the penultimate in that environment is coming up with a novel insight, or coming up with the insight that somebody hundreds or thousands of years ago came up with without even realizing it, and then you stumble upon it. So I think that's the first thing that comes to mind, which I think is maybe like often overlooked, but there are many other things that I'm sure we'll touch on.
They say that when there's two Jewish people in a village, they need 3 synagogues, one for him, one for me, and one that we're never ever going to go into. So I'm from the other synagogue. And when I look at that, I kind of look more on the Israel is a place that does not have natural resources. They do not have oil, at least until recently when they found some stuff in the Mediterranean. Water is scarce and a lot of things. So there's basically, how will Israel differentiate itself? How will Israel develop itself economically? And innovation and looking at different kinds of risk-taking is probably a necessity in the life of the Israel society. When you look at what Ari mentioned about the army, there's a misperception when you look at when we speak with American or non-Israeli things that, especially those who have an army experience, you see, oh, it's the discipline, it's the ability to follow a leader, and it's not that. It's about the cohesiveness of spending time with people that your life depends on them, forging that kind of relationship that creates the basis for teamwork and total trust of each other. If you look inside the founding parts of many of the companies, these are people who have known each other prior, maybe served in the same units in the army, would it be combat units or intelligence unit or IT or different type of things, and they learned that they need to work as a team. They also learned that they need to take responsibility. If you take a 21-year-old and tell him, hey, you have here X $1 million worth of tank and you need to make it work, then that guy acquires skill, that girl, by the way, acquires the skill and the leadership to then translate it into the business world, to the innovation world. And one thing basically that is I found very different in the US, because almost all Israelis went through an army, then when you're an Israeli boss, you know how to read an army resume. You know how to read that if this person, guy or girl, filled that role in their combat life or in their military life, then these are the skill sets that are transferable to civilian life. And if he was able to command a platoon, then I know he will be able, and he has the technical knowledge to run a development team, then I know that this thing may work.
I mean, we can keep going. I mean, just to point out, I mean, the army obviously has a huge impact on Israeli society. Army service is compulsory, and folks, even from a young age, like as soon as they're teenagers, even younger, I think in some instances, are already starting to go to prep schools that are more or less funnels into the most elite units. It's a whole world, and I think, but to maybe distill that down, there's a tremendous sense of purpose, and then there's a passion and an understanding of one's identity, and then the role somebody is playing in a bigger context that's much bigger than them. There's also just a tremendous amount of constraint in Israel. Like, we live in a large, really vast, beautiful country here with tremendous space and just tremendous wealth in the United States. I think for those of us that grew up here and haven't really lived in a totally different culture that's not like that, I don't even know if it's possible to like deeply appreciate how unusual that is. Certainly, and also in a historical context, but even in the world today, Israel is a tiny little sliver of land that, you know, historically its existence is not at all a given going forward, and it's surrounded by enemies and has been consistently under attack since inception. No natural resources. And so when you're living in an environment like that, and for a lot of the people that basically founded Israel, the people that are living there today are the direct descendants of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, you know, they flew persecution in different parts of the world, and this is the only place they have to live. And so in a certain sense, people feel like their life depends on being productive and innovating. So there's elements that I think are relevant, you know, to an audience here in Owensboro, Kentucky, and that can be applied. But I also think they're just inherent things that are distinct that maybe don't apply as well.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, when we go to the mentality part of it, the tolerance of failure, of the experimentation. Here you develop a company and it doesn't work for some reason. You probably, by then you have mortgaged your house. You took all the money from your parents and friends, raised investors who now hate you, and basically you're kind of, I'm exaggerating, but you're doomed for life. In Israel, because they understand the value of these experiences, they've created devices that include government support, organization support, investment tools that allow people to take things 3, 4, 5 steps further. If need be, fail a few times, pivot, go in a different direction, and failure is not a stain for life. There's tolerance for experimentation, there's a tolerance for eventually getting things right, and these are the economic miracles, the economic heroes that created all these things that we can now talk about, the success stories of Israel. Behind every success story there's probably 3 or 4 or 5, 6 failures, but there's tolerance for that.
So I think this comes out, so we're talking about some of the unique character traits and just the way the country is built and what drives the mentality, but then I'll point out 2 things that I think maybe we can tap into, even if we're not living there, right? One is, there's this idea of chutzpah, which is a Yiddish word. I'm sure many people are familiar with it. It basically means, it's hard to translate in English. It's having like a charmful audacity to just do things that kind of break the rules. There's generally a purpose behind it. It's not like just rebelliousness for the sake of being a jerk. It's like bending the rules, doing what you need to do to get something done. But there's a certain courage that takes. But that's definitely a mentality which is sort of built into the ethos. And I'll give it like an anecdote on that, just to kind of compare the 2 cultures, having spent meaningful time, deeply embedded in Silicon Valley, which is very laid back, compared to living and working in Tel Aviv, for example, which is like super intense. You meet with some folks in the Bay Area and you talk about getting a deal done. It's like, wow, that sounds interesting. I'll think about that, or like I'll give you a call, or maybe follow up sometime in the coming weeks. In Israel, like in the meeting, the guy picks up this phone and he's like, Ophir, bo עכשיו למטה לדבר עם האנשים האלו. He's like, he calls his buddy and he's like, come downstairs and talk to these guys I'm meeting with. And then the guy just shows up on the spot, and then like the whole conversation changes, and all of a sudden you're like in that meeting. You're in that meeting, that you were contemplating having. I mean, there's like a deep and almost dire sense of urgency, which borders on being maniacal, and a bias towards action, as opposed to just talking about things.
Yeah, and it's very, very informal. Like I said, he'll come down with his jeans and flip-flops and get things done. Maybe I kind of want to share an experience that I have with one of my clients. It's a city in the state of Georgia called Peachtree Corners, and they have decided it's a 12-year-old city that came out of an unincorporated county area. And they decided that their economic development, their differentiation, is going to be through creating a living lab that will allow companies to test, to develop products, to interact with real-life activities, both for autonomous vehicles, etc. When they were in the planning stages, say, how are we going to get people to pay attention for us? And luckily for me, for us, and for them, when I was still with the American Israel Chamber of Commerce and the Israel Consulate in Atlanta, said, well, let's start working with Israeli organizations and companies, because they are, in these fields, the most innovative, and they're also the most open and hungry and non-bureaucratic organizations. And they said, sure, let's do it. And today, there's probably about 50 Israeli companies that are working within that Curiosity Lab. There is actually, next week, there are 2 delegations, one from the military commander school and one from the municipal authority that are coming over there to understand how Israeli companies were able to insert themselves into a U.S. municipality and how that relationship goes. There is a MOU, an agreement that the Israel Innovation Authority now funds companies that will come to that location and do their work and their testing. Now, at that Curiosity Lab, they have relationship with France, with Canada, with Japan, with many other places around the globe. But their first port of call, the first country that they said, this fits our mentality of innovation, of breaking the rules, is Israel. And this thing they opened in 2019, and since then there's probably about 50 companies that are playing on that sandbox. So I have some information in the back there if you want to pick up, and I invite you all to come visit us there and kind of see it in your own eyes. If you get to Georgia, would love to host you there.
This is awesome. We only have a couple minutes left, but obviously Brian thought this was an important thing to have here at the event, to have this panel. So if you guys each take about 90 seconds here, because we have to wrap up, what is it you think you would like everybody to take away from just this panel right now?
So two things for me. One is unrelated but yet related. If you see here, I'm wearing this yellow pin, and I have some of them back in the exhibitors room. And this is basically a pin that kind of shows our, and it's not just an Israeli thing, it's obviously Israel is in a situation where it is in current war, and there's a lot of devastation and violence in the region that we live with. And a lot of the victims of this violence and extremism are related to civilians that have been kidnapped, civilians that have been displaced in Israel, in other places in that region. And this basically is kind of a showing to say that we have not forgotten you. So if you would like, you can pick up some of these things. The second thing, Israel is in a current situation of war. And I want to talk a little bit about the resiliency of Israel and the resiliency of the Israeli economy. Since October, when this war broke out and the horrific activities that led to it, in the last quarter of 2023, the Israeli economy dropped about 20%. GDP, I think, is the measure that they used. In the first quarter of 2024, while this war still rages on and people are drafted from their jobs to reserve duty, and I think the Israeli economy rebounded by 14% thus far. And this basically is a sign of a certain resiliency, that yes, we know how to work in these situations. We've been there many times. There's a graph that I always show that when you look at world crises that drop, the Israeli economy drops, but they're always an inch up above the OECD, an inch up above the world averages. So Israelis and the Israel country knows how to deal with adversity. It knows how to rebound.
Love that, and the resiliency, obviously, some of the innovation and the mindset that they have. So I would assume it has a lot to play to that. Ari, what would you like people to take away from this?
I mean, the country is an off-the-charts statistical anomaly. So there's something going on there. There's a lot to learn from that living experiment. And I'd say lean in with curiosity and just be open to learn. And if there's folks that, are tied in with Israeli companies that you have access to, or I don't know, maybe, Guy can connect to, maybe I can connect to, but I'm saying if you have an opportunity to work with an Israeli company or for your own just benefit, if there's something that you're curious to learn, lean into it. Israel's a ridiculously complex, not typically user-friendly or easy to understand place, particularly now. But I'd say just stay open and allow your curiosity and just genuine interest to guide you, and it could take you to really magical places.
I love it. Guy, Ari, thanks so much for this. Let's give him a round of applause. It was awesome.